thank you to Yes, and for giving me the opportunity to be able to spend this evening with all of you, to be able to chat about large research universities in America and sort of using Ohio State as an example. And certainly want to make sure this is a valuable use of your time. So I want to be able to have you all leave here with your questions answered, or at least make sure you have the appropriate resources to get your questions answered. And so again, just eternally grateful and just really looking forward to the next few minutes that we're going to be able to spend together. So I'm going to go ahead and then share my screen. What we'll do now is, and then go through our presentation. And as was already mentioned, see the chat, and so we'll make sure at the very end we'll get those questions addressed there. So let me go ahead. Um, Audiences and have worked for a number of different universities, and just really grateful to also be at Ohio State, which is a tremendous institution. So to dig into it, as was already mentioned, I think the one thing about a university like ours is that it does offer an incredible amount of academic options. So we have over 200 majors or bachelor's degrees, nearly over 500 minors and specializations. And during the course of the time at Ohio State, we have found close to anywhere from 50 to 75%. That range of students will either change their majors or add a major and do a double major. And I think this is such an incredible thing to emphasize because whether you're counseling your student or you're a parent or you're a student yourself, I think it's easy to know that, teenagers especially, or, even students in their 20s, heck, even my parents who are in their 70s, people change their minds, right? People develop other interests. So it's nice to know that you can enter an academic space and have access to different fields. So I think that's what separates us from institutions that maybe are very technical. Turkey is a great example where there are a lot of wonderful institutions of higher education, but a lot of those institutions are very specialized, right? They have something that is a technical university, or you might have a university that sort of focuses on the hospitality area. You might have a university that focuses on the arts. And for us, we have all of those various disciplines housed under the university with all of these different units. So we have 15 colleges that make up Ohio State University that students can apply to and be a part of. One point of emphasis that I also want to make here is that when students are applying to Ohio State University, in particular, first year students, so students that are coming out of secondary school with no university experience and are applying to Ohio State, we are referred to as major blind. And as all of you are sort of going through your college search process, this is an important term because there are some institutions that will review based on majors. So if you are applying to, there's another institution that is similar in size to us that's located in the state of Indiana that's very well known for engineering. And so because they're very well known for engineering, when you apply to that university, whether you apply, you're going to be looked at differently if you're applying to psychology as opposed to computer engineering, as opposed to business, right? Because their engineering programs are so competitive, it is more difficult to get into those majors. For us, because again, we're a larger university and we have the space and capacity. I just learned today that we actually, as far as American universities, we have the largest faculty by number of any American university. So when we talk about full-time faculty, part-time faculty, faculty that are in our medical schools, et cetera, it is the largest number of faculty across any US university. And so how that impacts your students is that we can have them come in major blind. So it's, are you competitive for Ohio State and the Columbus campus specifically? So whether they're applying to engineering or business or psychology or social work or education, it does not matter. And we think that type of messaging is really helpful for students who are unsure. How do they know they want to go into engineering if they've never taken an engineering class? How do they know they want to go into hospitality if they've never had a chance to work in a kitchen or work in a hotel, right? And so they get a chance to kind of have those types of experiences during their first year and then find out early if they want to change their mind or if they want to add on another major, they can do so. And I think those numbers are reflected here. In terms of the size of the Columbus campus, we have nearly 46,000 undergraduate students, over 11,000 graduate students. Graduate students are students working on their master's, their PhDs, or terminal degrees, and 3,200 professional students. So these are students that are in specialized programs like respiratory therapy or nursing. And so those are programs that are either bachelor's degrees or graduate degrees as well. And so it's a fairly large size. And I think the benefit to students is that they know they get to meet people from all over the world. We have students represented of all 50 states in the United States, and over 125 countries are represented on the Ohio State campus. So there's a tremendous amount of diversity, especially for students that are coming from Turkey, where it is, if you're coming from a city like Istanbul, where it is very cosmopolitan, it is very diverse in terms of nationalities represented. They'll see that at Ohio State amongst the student body. The nice thing, though, is that the size being large because, again, students were major blind, but students start in their major their very first year. They have the opportunity to create a very small academic space within the School of Business or School of Engineering or School of Communications or the College of Arts and Sciences or the School of Education. And so it's sort of the best of both worlds where you have the large university, but as your first year, you have the ability to be in sort of a smaller academic setting and switch between those settings. So as I mentioned, we have 15 colleges that make up Ohio State University. The one point of emphasis I want to mention here, which a number of my colleagues that work at other institutions that are similar to us we have a network of schools called the Big Ten across the United States. So these schools include the University of Michigan, Penn State, Indiana University, Iowa University, Nebraska, Illinois. These are all large state universities, public universities, with similar setups where they have a number of colleges that make them up. But only a handful of us are part of an organization called the AAU, the American Association of Universities. This is an invite-only organization that's comprised of 67 US universities and 2 Canadian universities. And these are universities that are considered to be the most premier research institutions in North America. And so Ohio State is one of them. You may be familiar with the categorization of R1, R2, R3. These are Research 1 universities, Research 2 universities, according to the Carnegie classification system. We at Ohio State are an R1 research school, which is the top tier. It's a reflection of the quality of research and amount of research that's happening. And there are only 146 universities in the United States that are designated as R1, and we're one of them. And so that research piece is relevant because it goes across all 15 colleges. It's not just research in engineering. It's not just the research in biology or chemistry. We're also talking about research in the humanities, research in the social sciences, research in the arts, research in agriculture. These are all areas where we're able to bring in a tremendous amount of resources for our students. And because we're an R1, and why this is, again, relevant for today, for your students that are doing this search, typically when you're talking about faculty that are looking to work, they want to go to R1 research schools. They want to go to AAU schools because the funding is there, the reputation is there, the resources are there. So when you have a school that sort of overlaps both, what you're talking about is you're able to bring in world-class faculty from all over the globe to your campus. And so we are in a fairly unique position in comparison to a lot of our peers because we're part of both schools. I'll share the list momentarily with you at the end of the presentation, where you can see it's the schools that overlap in those 2 lists tend to be Ivy League schools. It's your Massachusetts, your MITs, your Caltechs. And so for us, we're very grateful for that. And just to kind of hammer home that point one more time, Just recently, we had a faculty member win a small prize called the Nobel Prize for Physics. And he's a faculty member that works with our undergraduate students. So again, when you think of Ohio State, I think a lot of people tend to think of athletics and sports, but it is a major, major research school that has over 125 research centers. We have an entire medical complex. The medical school at Ohio State is one of the top medical schools in the region, one of the top medical schools in the country. And so it's, we're really, really focused on making sure students have access to those resources. And because we want to bring students in to have access, we want to keep them here. And I think that's really, really important if you're, again, a parent on this call or you're working with parents. People in my job, we spend all day talking about numbers and stats, and we spend a lot of time talking about what makes a school great. What I don't think we spend enough time talking about is sort of that, in the outcomes piece we talk a lot about, but we don't talk about the time in between. What happens when the students while they're there? How do we get them to make sure that they're ready for their career? How do we get them to make sure that they're ready for a life after Ohio State? And how do we make sure that they're happy? That's a big part of success too, right? It's coming to university and creating community and wanting to make sure that they're happy because we want them to come back. So I want us to think about that number again, 46,000 students, okay? What that means is, so we have students that will transfer in. So that's why it doesn't necessarily multiply across 4 years. And we also have 5-year programs as well. But we usually bring in a first-year class of around 8,000 to 8,500 students. So 8,000 to 8,500 first-year students. When we think about a class that size and just bringing people in, the assumption is that you will lose some of those students the second year. And I think a big marker of how a university is doing in terms of supporting its students is that first year retention rate. So how many of those students are coming back? Because that's a reflection of, again, happiness. That's a reflection of a consistency with cost. That's a reflection of a consistency with opportunities if students are changing their majors. So what does that look like for a school our size? Well, the percentage of students who return for their second year is 94%. So 94% of the students that come to Ohio State will come back for their second year. Our graduation rate across 6 years is around 84%. This is astonishing for a university our size. And so I think that is something that you're going to want to ask as you look at other top tier research institutions. A big part of it is you have the resources, but then what are you doing on the student side to make sure that students are coming back, or that you're not trying to weed students out? That's a phrase that's often used in the United States, where you have some institutions, some programs that are designed where they bring in a large first year class, but then they intentionally want to cut everyone out and only the strong remain for the year 2 and year 3 and year 4. And that's really difficult, because then what about those students that don't make that cut? Where do they go from there? We're trying to transfer into programs. And for us, it's again because we're focused on success and because there are plenty of opportunities that we're seeing many students returning, staying, and wanting their bachelor's degree from Ohio State. So a tremendous tradition that exists at Ohio State. I alluded to athletics. Because we're a larger school, the concept of school spirit is very prevalent at Ohio State. Here's just a picture of one of our American football games, where it is tradition for the marching band to spell out the state of Ohio at every game. And so that's what's called Script Ohio. So we've been doing it for, believe it or not, around 100 years. So that's been a tradition, to have the marching band do that. But that is, I think, the tradition, the history of Ohio State is another added component that you'll find at institutions our size. So you'll have individuals that will spell out Ohio with their hands, whether it be at the side of a residence hall, if they're, the picture in the middle there is over at a faculty member's house. The picture at the bottom is at a study abroad program. between the middle there is at one of the football games. It's you sort of see that pride for not just the state of Ohio, but for the university as well. And again, just a welcoming institution. As Jesse mentioned, we are in the city of Columbus and the university itself. This is, again, another question that I encourage all of you to ask, or in reflecting on the institutions that exist in your area. Think about the universities that are in Turkey, whether they be, across the city or across the country or in a place like Istanbul. How does the university interact with the city? And I think in most cases, what you'll find is that it is very isolated. Like the students stay on the university, they'll occasionally go into the city, and that's really about it. Or the people at the university or in the city don't really engage with the students at the university or the faculty in the university. There's typically what you see across a lot of European institutions and Asian institutions, and a lot of US institutions, to be frank. There's always a divide. And for us, we take our mission of recognizing that we want to be able to, I think, put students in a position where they're going to be ready for the real world. So it's about making sure that during their time at Ohio State, they aren't isolated, that they are able to engage with the greater community and the greater world. And so we want to have a breadth of diversity at the university because that's what the world is. And, it doesn't help a student coming in where they are surrounded by everyone that looks like them or comes from the same background as them. We want to make sure that we're welcoming because that diversity is so critical, I think, for that student development. So, and then again, I've spent a little bit of time talking about career placement. Because we have these 15 different colleges, each of the colleges has their own career people, which is really, really important to emphasize because going in for, as we all know on this call, going in for an engineering interview is going to look different than going in for an accounting interview, which is then going to look very different than going in for an education interview. So to be able to have professional staff whose sole responsibility is to be able to work with the students in the college, to be able to help prepare them for their area of interest, is something that you won't find at smaller liberal arts schools because it's just sort of a small institution where you aren't able to kind of really create these specializations. And so we want students to be able to craft their resumes, be prepared for those types of interviews. And that's how we sort of set up our career center and career placements. So those resources are dependent upon the program that the student is in. And then, of course, we do have larger university resources as well. A big part of our sort of career placement piece is engaging our alumni. We have one of the largest alumni bases in the world. We have over 650,000 living alumni across the globe. And so a big part of our Office of Alumni Engagement's mission is to be able to not only engage our alums, but have them engage our current students. And one aspect of that is through career preparation, career opportunities. And so we really do leverage the Ohio State brand and the Ohio State community to help our current students. And so, as I mentioned, this just sort of highlights some of the things I mentioned. Oh, here's a video. I just want to be able to share here.
I don't know if they can hear the voice, the speakers. In the video.
Oh, very sorry.
It's okay.
So it might just be an issue with the audio. So I will make sure to share that video because I think it's a very relevant video. It's a video of our international students at Ohio State and sort of their experience there, sort of being involved and engaged. So thank you for letting me know, and I'll make sure to share that video later. And so again, some of the different career placement opportunities, whether it be graduate schools across the US or just major Fortune 500 companies. And a lot of these, we have alumni, we have direct opportunities to be able to create internships here. So again, leveraging sort of the Ohio State brand. We have over 1,400 student organizations at Ohio State. So, and that's something that I think our students love knowing is that they can come here and they can be able to either create an organization or know that if there's something unique to them that they haven't really been able to find a community for, that the likelihood that it exists at Ohio State is very high. And again, another benefit of being able to go to a larger university like Ohio State is that that means there's more of a chance to be able to connect with students that have same passions, interests, and hobbies. So as mentioned with Columbus and sort of the way the university engages with the city, Columbus is a really interesting city. It is the 14th largest city in the United States. So to contextualize that, there are cities that we all sort of know, I think from media or from our own personal experience. So cities like Miami in Florida, cities like Seattle in Washington, cities like Boston in Massachusetts. Those are all major cities that we know about. Columbus is larger than all of them. Columbus is larger than Seattle. It is larger than Denver. It is larger than Boston. It is larger than Miami. And so we are a major metropolis. But we're set in Ohio, so you have the resources of a metropolis, but it doesn't feel as overwhelming as in New York City or as a Los Angeles, where there's a lot of this hustle and bustle. And so I think it is great for our students because then it allows them to easily be able to integrate, get access to entertainment options. We're able to bring in large concerts, large speakers, large festivals. But on the career side, this is relevant because think about New York and you have millions of people there. And if you're a student in New York and you're trying to get an internship, you're going to likely be at the very, very bottom of the totem pole, right? Because of how many people there are there, and the number of organizations there, and the number of students that are clamoring. In Ohio, we have a lot of those same companies that are based here or have branches here. We have a lot of people here. A lot of Fortune 500 companies have set up their headquarters here. And for our students, because the competition isn't as fierce, we're sort of the premier university in Ohio. They have a chance to get into those companies for their internships and do more valuable work and be able to get more experience. And we have found that that is really relevant and helpful when they're applying to jobs then, because then they can put on their resume like, oh yeah, I wasn't running around getting coffee and making copies. I was able to go in and I was able to create the blueprints for a building. I was able to go in and create a new curriculum for this school that I was working at. I was able to go in and work directly with individuals that needed mental health assistance. Like they can get those experiences firsthand and very early. And I think that's a way that we're really engaging the city. And I think the city loves knowing that there are 46,000 students that are here that are wanting to come in and work and wanting to come in and engage. And that's a big part of the economy is Ohio State University in Columbus. And so there is a really positive relationship between the two entities. And I think the students really benefit from it, both on the career side, the entertainment side, the travel side. It's an easy hub to get into and out of. Yes, and of course, speak firsthand. Again, we're the 14th largest city, but because we're located geographically in the Midwest, it doesn't feel like there's all this traffic. So security to get in and out of the airport, 45 minutes. Like if you get there before your flight leaves, 45 minutes, you're fine. It's remarkable. Right? Whereas in New York, you got to get there 2 hours before, in LA, 3 hours before. It's just a much, much easier sort of mindset. And again, just sort of the perfect parts of both worlds there. So I'll just sort of move forward a little bit. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the application process. I've talked a little about the university, the city, encouraged you to think about the questions that as you're sort of attending these presentations and visiting other schools and challenging your students as far as the important questions to ask that go beyond just sort of, do you have this major? I wanted to make sure we spent a little bit of time talking about the application process because it is very similar across a lot of the other institutions our size. So we utilize or participate in an entity called a common application. It's an application that students can submit, and it allows students to apply to multiple colleges at once, utilizing sort of one common application. There's usually like an additional supplement for each university that participates, but that's where our first year students can apply is through the common application. And it's open, it's live, it opened up August 1st. And that's the only portal through which students can apply to Ohio State University. And so there are a number of factors that we're looking at when we're trying to determine who is eligible for admission. We're looking for students that are prepared. We're looking for these non-academic factors, sort of, and those are being activities. What are your organizations? What are your clubs? Are you working part-time? What are you doing in terms of community service? How are you engaging the greater community around you? Are you coming from a single parent household? Are you traveling many hours to get to school? These are all different factors that we're sort of looking at when we're looking at the application, and we're looking for the past academic success. So what are the previous 3 years of secondary school showing to us in that application? We are right now big conversation in the United States is sort of test optional versus test required. With the pandemic, many universities in the United States, many universities across the globe, became test optional that were test required originally because it was difficult for students to get to testing centers to take the test. It was difficult for students to have the adequate preparation for it. So a lot of universities did the right thing and went test optional and wanted to make sure that they didn't penalize students for things that were out of their control. Since the pandemic, many schools have gone back to test required, very like high competitive schools. And there are other schools that are our size as well that are competitive schools that have gone back to test required. The University of Michigan has gone back to test required. Johns Hopkins has gone back to test required. We are still test optional as of right now. That may change next year, but we are still test optional. And what that means for us is we give students the option. If they want to submit their test scores, great. If they do, we will use them as a part of the admissions process. If they decide not to submit their test scores, it will have no negative impact on their application. It'll just be as if they never existed, and we're only going to use what's in the application and the transcripts to make the decision. So students should notify their preference on the common application if they want to be test considered or test optional. If they're test considered, then it'll show up as a checklist item that they need to submit their SAT, ACT scores in order for us to be able to review their application. So it is at the discretion of the student. And these are the critical deadlines. So November 1st is our early action deadline. January 15th is our regular decision deadline. Early action is a term that or a decision plan many universities have. It's different than early decision. So what early decision is a decision plan some universities and colleges have where it is a binding contract. If a student is admitted under early decision to a school, what that school and that student is saying is that student will be attending the following fall. That school is their top choice. They got in under early decision. They will be there that fall. What early action is it just is a way for the student to find out earlier whether they've been admitted, and it's non-binding. They get to wait until May 1st, which is the national intent to register deadline, to decide if they want to come to that school. And so we only have early action and regular decision. Regular decision is also non-binding. It's just a little bit later in the process, but we do not have early decision. We generally encourage all of our students that are interested in Ohio State to apply under early action because there really is no negative to it. You get to find out earlier whether you've been admitted, and who doesn't want to find out earlier. The other thing is that we want, if the student wants to be considered for the College of Engineering, for honors and scholars. I'll talk a little bit about merit scholarships in a little bit, where unfortunately our international students are not eligible for merit scholarships, but there are other scholarships they are eligible for, like the Stance Eminent Scholarship. But if you want to be considered for the College of Engineering and certain programs, you have to apply under early action. And we guarantee that if a student, international student that applies under early action, they will receive a decision on January 23rd. So that is we have one specific date that we let all of our international students know whether they've been admitted. So that's also really nice because then you don't have to worry about whether or not you got in, when are you going to find out. We let students know explicitly this is when you will find out. For regular decision, The students will be notified usually the third week of March if they apply under regular decision. And so I'll pass over to that real quick. So I mentioned sort of the scholarship piece. So we have a portal that we developed called Scholarship Universe. What Scholarship Universe is a portal that students can access once they've applied to Ohio State, and they fill out one singular application. By filling out that application, they can then see what scholarships they're eligible for at Ohio State, which is incredibly convenient, right? Think about your experience as an undergraduate student applying to scholarships where you maybe had to submit an application that had a 500-word essay, you had to submit an application that involved doing an interview, you had to submit an application that involved writing a poem, whatever it might have been. For us, it's this one universal scholarship application that students fill out. And then they can see which ones they're eligible for and they apply. And then they typically will find out in March or April if they've received those scholarships of the application cycle. So it's something that we really encourage all of our international students to take advantage of, because there are scholarships that are specific to academic departments. There are scholarships that are specific to regions of the world. We have a lot of our alumni clubs across the globe that will create scholarships for students from their area. So Indonesia, for example, they have an annual scholarship that they give out of around 5,000 US dollars for any eligible Indonesian student that comes from Indonesia to Ohio State. I should have prepared. I don't know if the Turkish Alumni Club has created one, but I can also look up that information for you as well. And so there's a video, which I don't think the audio will work, but I'll share that one later. So we are exactly at 1:35 as promised on the dot. And so I'll stop sharing, and I want to use this opportunity to answer any questions that might have come out regarding things that I've shared, or again, it doesn't necessarily have to be Ohio State. It could be about other R1 research institutions, AAU institutions, et cetera. As I mentioned, I will share right now in the chat what those AAU institutions are and those R1 research institutions are. But I'll turn it back over to you, for, I guess, facilitating any questions.
No, we're happy to do that. So Türkçe de sorabilirsiniz, and or you can ask in English. You can take yourself off mute or just put a note chat kısmında yazabilirsiniz. Türkçe de olabilir. Maybe as folks think about their questions, I do want to say something, because like I said, I got the chance to visit last summer, and working with Turkish students, like Ben was saying, especially if you're from Istanbul, Ankara, or Izmir, these are large cities, and we hear all the time how students want to be in an urban environment. I really cannot think of a better way to do it if they want to be in a research institution, because you're in the middle of the city and it's super large. There's everything you can think of, right? It's a really fun place. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the cost is so much more manageable than like the other sort of major hubs of New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. So you get the resources of those types of cities, but in a much more affordable space too.
And is it correct that people are a little nicer in the middle here?
I like to think so, but I'm originally from New York, so moving here, I most
Okay.
definitely feel that I questioned everyone because I felt like there was just
Right.
people were being too nice almost. Yeah.
They're really nice. Çok iyi insanlar. Okay, Isha Maradon is asking a question. As for engineering, she says, what will be the minimum requirements for an IB student, international student? Good question.
Yeah. Great question, because I still need to get some of that information. So so for again, what we're really looking at is sort of the performance of the student over the previous 3 years, right? So we typically want to try to compare students as equitable as possible. So we're really requiring 3 years worth of academic records from your secondary school to see your performance. So there isn't, I would say, a minimum requirement that you need to have this, because we do use a holistic review where we're trying to get a sense on everything that is available to the student and the student's circumstances to see if they would be a good fit and they would be competitive. So the example I want to provide here is, let's say a student is in a school where it doesn't have the full diploma. It has a handful of programs where students can get the certificates, but they don't have the ability to do the full diploma. There's no TOK, there's none of that. Versus the student that is in a school that does have the full diploma, and they're only taking one IB course or one IB subject. We will look at that and see like, oh, well, this student is pushing themselves with what is available in their school environment. They're taking while there aren't a lot of IB courses, they're taking everything that's available to them, versus this other student who is maybe has all of the courses available to them, but they're only taking one. 9 times out of 10, if the grades are equal, we will take the student that is in that other environment that has like the fewer IB courses, but they've taken advantage of everything that's available for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very specific example, but I share that just to be able to kind of say like it's hard to kind of say we don't really use minimum requirements. I can certainly provide averages, and that's part of the information I need to share with Yesim later, is sort of what our averages are. But it's really more just about looking at what is available in your high school and how you're taking advantage of it, and if you're really pushing yourself in that specific field. I will share that we do accept IB exam credit, and we just changed this policy. Yes, so I will share this. We will, for students that come in with IB exam scores, for if you're taking HLs, if you receive a 4 or higher on HLs, higher levels, we will honor that for course credit. If you receive a 5 or higher on SL, standard levels, we will honor that for course credit. Before, we did not take S standard level exams for college credit. Starting this year, we will.
Oh, another question. If do you want to take yourself off mute and ask this? Or I can read it for you, but it would be great.
Right.
Come on in. There you go.
If I'm not mistaken, Ohio State University doesn't consider regular decision applicants for scholarships. So I was curious, is that also the case in other AAU members?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. That's a great question. So as I mentioned, yeah, we do not offer merit scholarships. So these are academic specific scholarships that are offered through admissions for all international applicants. So whether it's early action or regular decision, there is no merit scholarship there. And that's why we encourage students to utilize Scholarship Universe, where those scholarships are managed and funded by different departments across campus. But your question was, do other AAU members offer essentially merit scholarships? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
So it just depends upon the institution, and that's where the research will be important on your part to see how certain schools offer merit. So an example would be Florida State University. It is located in Tallahassee, Florida. They're a large state university. And they do offer merit scholarships for international students. So it is a part of that research there. But that's a really, really, really good question. I do see a question about standardized test scores. Do you mind if I take that one?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so which standardized test score such as IB, AP, SAT is more powerful for your uni application? It's a really good question. I would say it is all important. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. The IB and AP, I would say, is more important than the SAT this year because that's your curriculum, right? Those are courses that you're taking, and whether you're taking, and that shows that you're pushing yourself in those specific courses. So if we see IB and AP and we consider those comparable, or if there are other programs that are out there like A levels or AS levels, like we would see that and say like, yes, that is a student pushing themselves, and that is really good, and that is a positive factor. The SAT, as I mentioned, especially being test optional, isn't something that is curriculum based. It is based upon a test of your knowledge at that particular time on sort of general things. And so if you have a high score, fantastic, great, submit it. We want to use it. But if you don't, then it won't have, like I said, have a negative impact on your application. So if I were looking at those three things that you sort of mentioned specifically, I would put IB and AP at the top and then SAT below that. Mhm.
Great. The next one is in English as well. So
Yeah.
Zop wants to know prerequisites. And
Yeah.
she's asking if there's there's conditional admits, I guess, in the US, but okay.
Good question.
Yeah.
That's a good question. So some universities do. So our colleagues, let's say, again, we're Ohio State, we're in Ohio, we're a Big Ten institution. I'm going to use my colleagues at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, another member of the AAU, an R1 research institution, a larger institution. They do want to see the AP scores if you have them available. And so for us, you are welcome to submit them, but we do not require them. It's not something that we need in the admissions process because, again, we're looking at grades 9, 10, 11 typically, or the previous 3 years. And so there are only a handful of students that will have access to AP exams and AP exam scores. And so we don't want to unfairly, I guess, sort of unfairly review or have a negative impact on those students because they didn't have access to those things. And so that your question most definitely makes sense. I would say if you have it, you're welcome to submit it, but I would say look at the schools that do require it and send it to them first, because also sending AP scores, which you may not know, it costs money. And so if we don't require it, then save some money. Yeah.
I have a
Yes.
question. I want to make sure I understood her question correctly. I think you answered it, but I also started thinking, do you mean, Ozamanım, do you mean like if I take an AP class at my school, but then I take the test and I get a 2 and I don't submit it? Is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly
Okay,
right.
good.
Yeah.
So you did answer
Yeah.
it exactly in that
That's
context. Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we
Good.
don't offer, and we don't do conditional admit on those scores. Like there are some that will do some, an example would be A levels, AS levels. If you're familiar with the British pattern system, they will do predicted scores. We don't do that. We will accept AP exam scores for credit though. So typically it's a 4 or higher. Sometimes it's a 3. But that doesn't have an impact on the admissions process. That's more of an impact on your degree and the credits that will apply towards your degree.
Mhm. And we have an excellent question in Turkish after that. And they're asking, without any financial support, the merit or need-based aid, what would be the tuition and then total cost of attendance for Ohio State?
That's a really, really good question. Yeah, so we do offer an estimated cost of attendance for international students. So one thing I should have mentioned as well, and while I'm pulling this information up so that way you have access to it, is that we do have, which is a fairly unique thing to US institutions, is a requirement for housing. So we have housing at Ohio State that is university housing. We require all students that are coming in as first-year students to live in university housing for 2 years. So if you're coming from, and includes international students, so if you're coming from Turkey or Vietnam or Hong Kong or Chile, you must live in university housing for 2 academic years. The reason for this is primarily recognizing that we have a large number of students that are not coming from Columbus, so they don't know the area. So we want to make sure that they are in a place that parents feel comfortable and secure with. And then 2, it's really about creating that community. You have students that are, again, coming across from all over the globe, and we want them to be able to be in a space where they can connect and learn from each other. So that's why we have that 2-year university housing requirement. Year 3 and year 4, it is optional. Students are welcome to live in university housing or apply for university housing for year 3 or year 4, but they'll typically find that they will live off campus, especially now at that point, halfway through their experience at Ohio State. They know this, they're starting to get to know the city fairly well, and they know where they want to live around the city too. And sometimes it's a little bit cheaper. So the cost of attendance there is listed in the link I just sent if you want to utilize for the upcoming year. And again, this is with no aid. And what we do is we incorporate like estimated costs for books, supplies, health insurance, etc. So what we're looking at there is probably close to the range of between 62 to 63,000 US dollars a year.
Which is actually lower than a lot of institutions, by the way, if you compare it to an apples to apples basis.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have a very engaged group with really good questions here.
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm loving it. This is fun.
Some students, which is nice to hear that they're actively, they're doing their decisioning themselves and research. We like that. Bravo, Efe.
Yeah.
Other questions? I'm going to stop recording if that's okay with everybody, and then
Absolutely.